Hey guys, welcome back to our second quarantine episode of How the Light Gets In. Still rocking the dope green screen. Still a dog here, so if you hear him, he's around. So after I got done watching the Gabriel Fernandez show and was really sad and had given up on humanity, I decided I needed to watch something a little more happy to cheer myself up. And in retrospect, I definitely should have just watched New Girl again, but instead I watched Love is Blind, which didn't really help with the hope for humanity part, but it did cheer me up. However, I am a marriage and family therapist, so all I could think of was all the things that were wrong. So we're gonna talk about Love is Blind today, because there's a lot. These are the note cards with all my thoughts on them. Y'all have no idea how close we got to a Pepe Sylvia board again. If I could still use my office, we would have one, but I can't, so I just have a giant stack of note cards. Okay, so I had a little bit of trouble structuring this for myself because I had so many thoughts. So if it feels a little bit all over the place, it is because I am a little bit all over the place with it. So I'm going to start with just some general thoughts regarding Love is Blind, and then we'll go from there. So first of all, this whole premise is bullshit. Stop calling it an experiment because it's not an experiment. It's a reality TV show, and we all know it. The thing that bothers me about calling it an experiment is that it makes it sound like there's something scientifically meaningful about it, and there's not. In no way does this show strive to prove that love is blind or whatever. It does prove that you can form an intense emotional connection with someone who you've never seen face to face. But if you spent any time on AIM when you were in middle school or Twitter now, you're already very aware that that's a thing. So they're not exactly breaking new ground. Plus, the way that they have structured this show is nonsense because they set up all these extra little barriers and time pressures to make it more intense than it really needs to be. And that makes me angry because you're creating a traumatic situation. Of course, people are going to bond very tightly to one another during it. That's what human beings do. Stop pretending like you're doing science, Love is Blind. We all know that you're not. The experiment aspect of this just made me mad the entire show. And every time someone referred to the experiment, I got super irritated. Because it's not an experiment. It's a reality show. And you did dumb shit to make sure there'd be drama. And you can't tell me otherwise. So Love is Blind annoyed me while it delighted me. But it annoyed me for the same reason that rom-coms annoy me, which is just that people have these weird half confrontations where they storm out and stop speaking, and no one ever just says what they mean or confronts people they should confront or, I don't know, deals with anything ever. They just take their hurt feelings and go nurse them in a corner. And that's a bad system. And this show has a lot of those kinds of moments on it. I do have to say, this has nothing to do with anything, but it was my favorite moment of the entire series. And it happens 12 minutes into the very first episode. So I think Lauren is on one pod and the other pod is some dude that we never see again. And he guesses that she's African American and she gets offended because duh, and says, actually, I'm Caucasian. And the dude does a little fist pump over in his little secret pod. And I'm just really glad that that guy looks like an asshole on a preserved public medium for the rest of time. Even if you don't watch the rest of the show, just watch it long enough to see that moment, because I rewound it and watched it over again 9 times because it made me laugh so hard. Also, Rory is the best part of this entire show. And I know that he's only on screen for 14 minutes, but if they do a season 2, cancel Nick and Vanessa Lachey and let Roy host. Rory's amazing. He has a beautiful, pure soul, and I love him. And I want him to be in charge of, if not my life, then at least this show moving forward. Okay, so this kind of goes back to my first point here. But when they're leaving Mexico and they're gonna go move in together or whatever, Vanessa asks all of the couples, how are you guys gonna integrate your life? And that question pisses me off. Because when you integrate your lives with your partner, that's a slow process that most people spread out over many months or a couple of years. Like, slowly you introduce them to your family and your friends and your home and every other aspect of your lives. You don't just do it all at once in like a week. Again, this show sets these people up for really weird situations because they created this false time pressure just for the sake of getting the show out sooner. Which I get, like, production schedules exist, but if they had stretched this out longer and there had been like 4 times as many episodes, I still would have watched every minute of it and been just as happy. Although there probably would have been less crazy drama, so I guess it makes sense. Also, I couldn't figure out how to talk about this any other point in the video, so we're just going to talk about it now. Amber throws that little surprise birthday party for Barnett, and Jessica lost her mind. That was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen on television. Like, I don't watch most reality TV. I watch like competition cooking shows, and I watched Forged in Fire because that's awesome. But I don't watch like The Bachelor, and I didn't watch Flavor of Love. I didn't do any of that. But that one episode where Jessica is shamelessly throwing herself at Barnett and Gigi and Damien are fighting in a corner over nothing. I don't know what to say about it. I just needed you to know that I know that it's crazy, I guess, is the whole point of this anyway. Okay, so we're going to talk about every couple. Probably. Some more than others. We're not going to talk about Kenny and Kelly very much because I truly do not understand what happened there. Like, I think I said to Michael, that's my boyfriend. Sorry, my boyfriend. I said to him, like, halfway through the series, Kenny and Kelly are going to be fine. They're, like, made for each other. And then they didn't end up together. And I don't understand why. Like, everything was fine, and then all of a sudden Kelly had, like, a whole bunch of doubts or, like, didn't think she was really in love with him. Like, I don't understand what happened. I don't know what Kelly's doing. Also, is Kelly in an MLM? Because it really seems like she's in an MLM. I can't prove it. That's just the vibe I got. Plus, she calls herself, like, a wellness coach, and I'm not sure that's a real job. If anyone knows for sure, let me know. Also, if you have the same, like, what's the word? Burning hatred for MLMs that I do, you should absolutely listen to the Dream podcast because it's like super good. But yeah, I felt super bad for Kenny and I don't understand what happened and I don't know what, if anything, he did wrong. And I don't get it. I don't get it. It was weird. Carlton and Diamond was a shit show, but it made me really mad because it really didn't have to be a shit show. Like, it could have been super chill and, like, okay, but it wasn't. I mean, like, I don't think, let me say this first, I don't think that Carlton did anything wrong by not, like, starting every conversation he had with a woman by saying, "Hi, hello, my name is Carlton, I am bisexual." Like, that's a weird way to play it. I do think, however, once he thought he had a good enough connection with Diamond to consider spending the rest of his life with her, he should have told her then, instead of waiting until, like, it was a done deal and super duper happening. That was a bad plan. But I think it's pretty normal for us to, like, roll out our secrets slowly. And, like, no one goes on a first date and is like, "Hi, hello, here's all the weird things about me that might be a deal breaker." Because then you look like you're crazy. And it's a bad start. So I don't think he did anything wrong by waiting. But the way that he told her made my heart hurt. Like, he pushed her away super hard before he told her, which made it really obvious that he was about to drop some giant, like, nuclear bomb of information. And if he hadn't built it up so much like that, I think it would have been a little bit better when he finally said what he was trying to say. And then he acted like a total child because he was so afraid that she was going to reject him. But he didn't, like, give her a chance to decide one way or the other. He just decided that he was being rejected and threw a giant tantrum and was super mean to her. And I don't think she deserved it. I mean, I did a bunch of, like, searching on Reddit and Twitter about Love is Blind to see how other people felt, and a lot of people disagree with me on the Carlton stuff, but everyone kind of unanimously agrees that he was acting like an angry child throwing a giant tantrum. And especially, like, you can see how hard Carlton is trying to protect himself when they're having that, like, big fight during the day, like the second day. Because he says, like, with or without this situation, I'm going to be fine. which is basically the same thing as saying, like, you don't get to hurt me. When if he had just, like, given her a minute and been patient and acknowledged that she was feeling lied to and taken advantage of and, like, tricked, I think they probably could have worked it out. But instead, he acted like her having a moment of pause and, like, some feelings about the situation made her a giant monster. And so no one walked away happy, which was really disappointing because I actually thought they were super cute together. Like, I could be wrong about this, but I actually think the main reason that Carlton overreacted so hard is that he hasn't accepted that part of himself. I think that Carlton still has a lot of shame about his sexuality, and he needs other people to validate it for him so that he can feel okay about it. And when, like, Diamond didn't, like, make a banner and throw glitter in the air and say, huzzah, you've had sex with men, he, like, had a whole moment about it and couldn't pull it back to, like, reasonable human levels of emotion. Because I really do think that Diamond could have been pretty understanding about the whole thing if we had just given her a chance to do that. Okay. Now we have to talk about Amber and Barnett. And I had a hard time figuring out where to put the Jessica and Barnett stuff. So it's actually all with the Jessica and Mark stuff. So we're not really going to talk about that right now. I'm sorry. We're going to get to it. Just hang in there with me for a minute. So I definitely noticed that Barnett really thrives on female attention. So this whole experiment is like a dream situation for him where, like, women that he doesn't have to make eye contact with just, like, want his attention and understanding and interest. And at the same time, I think that Amber has a similar situation where, like, male attention is kind of everything for her. And so I think in that respect, they're going to do really well together unless one of them stops carrying their side of the equation, and then it's going to explode in a really spectacular way. But maybe they'll make that public and we'll get to be entertained by it. So the first, like, major huge drama thing is the whole, like, Jessica thinks Barnett wants to marry her, and then he's like, I don't know. And she's like, fuck you. But I think what happened there is Barnett was not asking her to marry him. He was proposing hypothetical situations because he wanted to find out, like, what exactly her level of engagement with him was, which is a pretty normal thing to do. The problem is that he asked the question in a really stupid way. And so she thought that something was happening that wasn't actually. Mark asked it better, though. Mark said, if I ask you to spend the rest of your life with me, where's your mind at? Like, that's a way better question. It's hypothetical. It creates an opportunity to discuss possibilities. Like, that's the kind of conversation you should be having, not like this, well, when I propose thing that Barnett was doing that made everything really awkward for everyone, but also really entertaining. I feel like I should say, by the way, like, I totally know that these are real people. Like, and I'm not judging them, I'm not diagnosing them, I'm not trying to shame them at all. I just think that there's a lot of really interesting pieces of relationships and what those can look like for us to look at here. So I'm not doing a great job of separating my glee as a viewer from, like, my actual, like, therapist-y brain thoughts. So I hope I don't sound like a dick. Anyway. I think the main reason that Amber and Barnett wound up together is that Amber really, really understands who Barnett is in a way that Elsie and Jessica just don't. They think they do, especially Jessica. Jessica thinks that she knows Barnett super well, and she does not. But Amber does. So she could roll with that uncertainty and deal with who he really was, and that's why they're the ones who wound up together. I do also love that Amber did not for a minute get confused by the crap that Jessica tried to pull. Like, Amber might be my favorite, honestly. Like, she is not fucking around with any of this, and I respect her. One thing I thought was super interesting about Barnett, though, is that you can kind of tell how sensitive he is to the opinions and judgment of other people. Like, he worries a ton about how his family's going to react to all this. He worries a ton about how Amber, Elsie, and Jessica are reacting to him, which is why he got so weird when he couldn't decide. He got super anxious before he showed Amber where he lived, which I thought was adorable, because is Amber, like, homeless? It's very unclear what her living situation is, and we never look at it. So I don't know. Anyway, like, it's very obvious to me that Barnett is very, very sensitive to how other people view him, which is why it's fascinating to me that a person like that would go on a reality show at all, but that's neither here nor there. I do want to say too, like, drunk Amber at the bachelorette party where she like made herself cry about how much she loved him is maybe the best thing of this whole show. Like, it's so cute. She loves him. It's beautiful. I'm glad they wound up together. That's all. That having been said, like, I'm not surprised at all that Barnett kind of freaked out before the wedding, but I think you have to give Amber like super respect for being able to totally roll with that and hang in there for it, because that part can't have been easy. Like, I think anyone else on the show would have kind of freaked about it, but she was just like, he's just being who he is. Like, it'll all probably be fine. And so that was super cool to see. I'm glad that those two wound up together, because I actually think they have potential to be together like for the long haul. We're going to talk about Damian and Gigi, but honestly, those two were so all over the place that I don't really know what to say. Like, I feel like Gigi just kept like pushing and testing limits and trying to see like how far she could push Damian, and Damian would put up for a while and then be like, hey, could you please get your shit together? You're making me crazy. And she would be like, I'm sorry, I'm done. And then she'd do it all over again. So it makes total sense to me that he said no when they got married, because like, how are you supposed to believe that this woman loves you and wants to be with you when she like tells you that the sex with you is terrible and then like yells at you while you're just trying to lie in bed or whatever? That having been said, like, they did have some like really nice like moments of honesty and vulnerability and intimacy with each other that I thought was really, really cool. So I'm glad that they did actually wind up getting back together, because I think they could actually make things work. I do think that Gigi probably needs some therapy, and I'll tell you why. And it's not because I diagnosed her. It's because, did y'all see her mother? Like, Mama Gigi is crazy and judgmental, and like, so she's super focused on appearances. You can completely tell that that's like literally all she cares about. That is the assumption I make about most people who wear colored contact lenses all the time, which might be a tiny bit unfair, but I also just think it's true because I don't know why else you would bother. But then, so after Damian says no and Gigi does her super dramatic, like, run away from the wedding in the rain in your wedding dress through a ditch, like, so extra. Anyway, so her mother catches up to her, and then her mother says to her, everything is shit. Ideally, you would have said no and he would have said yes, not the reverse, because this way it hurts more. I almost died. And then she started weeping. And the fact that Gigi basically got like shut down at the altar on her wedding day became about her mother. And that was the moment of the show where I was like, oh, that's why Gigi is like this. Yeah, I think a little bit of therapy is going to help that situation a lot, because Mama Gigi's crazy, guys. I don't know what else to say. I think she's got some very serious personality disorder issues, but I don't know. Okay, so now we need to briefly talk about Lauren and Cameron, who are definitely my favorite, and I assume everyone's favorite because they're basically perfect. Like, my note card for Lauren and Cameron says Lauren and Cameron forever, because I love them. But the reason that they are so great is the reason that any great couple is great. And that's because those two can tolerate their own issues with intimacy and vulnerability and anxiety. And they can tolerate them really, really well. Like, Lauren has a lot of very obvious anxiety and fear about getting married. And she doesn't like project that on Cameron or make that Cameron's problem. She just like gives it voice and acknowledges it exists, and then doesn't allow it to make her choices for her. Before they get married, Cameron asks her multiple times, like, do you think you're going to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? Like, he's looking for a 100% buy-in from her. And she unfortunately cannot give that to him just because of her own anxiety. But even though she's not giving him the answer he wants, he doesn't freak out. He just deals with it. He accepts that he's not going to know 100% until he hears what she has to say at the altar. And that, to me, is one of the primary strengths of a couple. Lauren says, like, we don't have time to lie to each other to protect each other's feelings. And that's exactly the way that every couple needs to handle difficult situations. Like, the reason that we struggle so much, to be honest, is that we become so important to each other, we feel like we can't risk that. But none of us have time to lie to each other just to make each other feel warm and sunshiny and special. Like, honesty is important, and having the ability to tolerate your own anxiety is important. And part of why I love and respect Lauren and Cameron so much is because I feel like they can actually do that. Okay, kids, it's time for the big one. Yeah, it's Mark and Jessica time. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm going to try and keep it relatively succinct. First and foremost, can we talk about the friggin' Italian beef? Like, do me a favor. Pause this right now, like pause this video and Google a recipe for Italian beef. And then if you can explain to me why this is such a big deal, please do it. Because I feel like an unsupervised 8-year-old could make Italian beef, and Jessica talks about it like it's an unreal superpower. You throw a pot roast in a pot with some seasoning for 12 hours. That's it, guys. That's the recipe. Why are they so excited about this? I'm sure it's delicious, but like what? Like, unless she goes out into a field and kills and butchers her own cow, I just don't see what the big damn deal is. And it comes up 4 times an episode for 10 episodes. I don't get it. Okay. I'm gonna let that one go. It just started to really irritate me after a while, because I did watch this series twice. And like the first time it was annoying, but I could deal with it. And the second time, every time the words Italian beef came out of someone's mouth, I just wanted to like turn it off and never look at it again. I just like the hypocrisy of every single move that Jessica makes hurts my brain. Like, she tells Mark, I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't pursue other options while they're still in the pods. And then Barnett tells her that that's what he's doing, and she loses her shit. So like, which is it, sister? Are you allowed to do this or not? And like, overall, I think the main reason that Jessica got engaged to Mark is out of spite. Like, Barnett had a moment of uncertainty, which I think is like a normal thing when you're about to decide if a stranger is someone that you want to legally marry for the purposes of a reality television show. But she like lost her shit and got super mad about it, and then like talked a bunch of shit on him to Elsie and Amber, who she knew he was really interested in. Luckily, neither one of them bought into that nonsense. But she just, I will say, like, I tried really hard on the second viewing to be very thoughtful about my opinion about Jessica. Because the first time I watched it through, I had a visceral reaction to her being kind of a terrible person. And the second time, like, I get it. Like, her father abandoned her when she was born. She has a lot of issues around intimacy and vulnerability. She has a really hard time trusting other people. I get all that. And if all of that had prevented her from marrying Mark, like, that would be fine. My issue is that she turned that into a reason to pursue someone who was engaged to another person. She was blatantly disrespectful and condescending to Mark at every possible opportunity. And then homegirl at her wedding comes bebopping down that aisle with no flowers, gum in her mouth. She was chewing gum. Did you guys notice? Like, I actually think it might have been nicotine gum, because I think maybe our girl used to be a smoker, and so that was like an anxiety management tool. And while that does make sense, it's still fucking insane. Why are you chewing gum while you're walking down the aisle? She's all smiles and I love you and I think you're great. And then she's just like, no. And that was the moment that I was like, no, I can't be sensitive to who she is as a person and why she's like this, because she's terrible. Like, if you didn't want to get married, which you very obviously didn't, then decide a really long time ago that you don't want to get married. Because it's not like she didn't know that basically since Mexico. Jessica's annoying, guys. And send me your best Jessica memes, because there's so many and I love them. Send me all of them. Okay. I honestly think that Jessica's favorite thing about Mark is how much Mark liked her, which, shocker, is not like a great reason to form an entire relationship and bind yourself legally to another human being. So again, glad she didn't marry Mark, because that would have been miserable. But for real, like, figure yourself out. She is like projecting her feelings on literally everyone in the entire world all the time. She like creates these very intense opportunities for other people to like pass judgment on her relationship and talk her out of it. And then like you can kind of see how disappointed she is when they don't do it. Like, I think she was really banking. There's a dog here. I think she was really banking on Mark's parents having a problem with their relationship. And you could see how disappointed she was when Mark's mom was just like, no, it seems okay. And then when she goes up to lunch with her friends before the wedding and she shows them the ring, she doesn't like do the engaged girl thing where you like hold your hand up. I'm not engaged, by the way. This is my Nana's ring. She like takes it off and lays just the ring in the middle of the table. Who has ever done that in a million years of women telling their girlfriends that they're getting married? No one. No one has ever done that. That's the thing people do when they don't want to get married. She had that ring on and off and on, like, make up your mind. And Mark is like a pure sweet little angel who I actually think was like really emotionally mature, and she kept acting like he was too young to make these sorts of decisions, and he's a grown-up. It made me mad. I hope Mark is okay. I worry that this is gonna like ruin him for future relationships. And judging by the reunion, he's kind of okay, but like she kind of stomped on his heart. And it is terrible. There's a dog here. So like when they're in Mexico and the whole gang reunites again, Jessica says this whole thing about how like Barnett's really deeply troubled and he seems really confused. And she keeps making comments about how like the connection they made in the pods was like totally unmatched by anything that anyone could ever do. And it's like creepy, honestly. Like she thinks that she knows him so well and that they have this amazing connection that could never be matched by two other human beings. And that's just not what's happening. And so it's like uncomfortable and awkward to watch her continually make these statements and like drink too much wine and throw herself at him again. And then like after his birthday party, they have that like weird little confrontation in the apartment complex where she pretends to be super happy for him, even though she obviously isn't, and then pretends to be really shocked that Barnett thinks that she's interested in him when she said like 19 things that suggest that she's really, really into him. She's just like really dishonest throughout the whole thing, like to herself and to Mark and to Barnett and to Amber and to any other human being that she interacts with. And it makes it hard to like her, even if you understand why she's like this. And I do, guys, I get it. I understand what trauma and abandonment issues can do to a person, but quit making it everyone else's problem, man. Like it's hard to watch and it makes me cranky. My other favorite thing is that like every other word out of Mark and Jessica's mouth was something about how they're like literally the same person. And then 10 seconds later, Jessica will say something about how different they are. And at some point they need to decide, are you the same or are you different? Because you can't keep saying both. Oh, okay, so then there's like the complete panic attack that Jessica has when she tries on that wedding dress, which I think should have been the end of it. Because what she says is like, this doesn't feel right. It feels really pretty, which is a weird thing to say. And then she says, it's a forever dress. And then she says, I still need time, I'm suffocating. Just accept that you don't want to get married, man. That's the thing, I think I already said this, but that is the thing that really made it impossible for me to feel good about who she is as a person. Because she knew she didn't want to marry Mark. Way before she ever walked down that aisle. But like, this poor man put on a tuxedo and rounded up all of his friends and family so that he could be dumped by some lady chewing gum in front of them. It's awful, and it makes me feel a lot of feelings, none of which are particularly positive. This one's my favorite. Okay, so Jessica makes a comment about how Mark's really emotionally available. And she says, like, he's too emotionally available. And to me, that's a red flag. Most men just aren't that emotionally available. And I feel like Jessica should have just worn a giant red flag instead of a wedding dress, because thinking like that is a red flag. Men are allowed to be emotionally available. Men should be more emotionally available. I think we'd all be a lot happier if they would figure out a way to do that. Part of why everyone loves Cameron so much is because he's super emotionally available, and this girl can't deal with it. And I think that's why she's so obsessed with Barnett. I think that's what it comes down to ultimately. Because Mark can handle intimacy, and Mark likes intimacy, so he seeks it out, and Barnett doesn't. And so like, she could feel more comfortable with Barnett because he never pushed her any farther than she wanted to go. And Mark was consistently pushing her in directions that she couldn't handle. I really think that's what it comes down to. Not that that's everything that anyone said, but that's what I believe. Also, Jessica let her dog eat wine, and I don't think that dogs can metabolize the grapes. And if you understand that reference, we're best friends now. Okay, so I have a lot of favorite moments, and they're all like really tiny. But after Jessica says no to him at the altar, and it's like all over, they cut really quickly to a couple of their bridesmaids. And Jessica's friends are like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing for her. And the other one's like, I know, right? And it made me laugh a lot. Okay, this is the last thing, well, among the last things I'm going to say about Jessica, because her whole little speech after the wedding and at the end of the series before the reunion, she's like, I'm not walking out of here with reservations with a wedding band on my finger. There's no way in hell. Like, I've been around the block, my parents are divorced, and I'm too much of a realist to take this big of a chance. I'm not gonna do it. I guess I'll apologize, but I'm not actually sorry. She said, I was so open in the pod and I couldn't translate that to real life. Which, the way that she says it makes me think that she thinks that she like really explained this and made herself look good. But all she did was basically say like, intimacy's too hard for me, so I quit. And that's really, really sad. And I really, like, I don't want Jessica to be miserable for life, and I don't think that she's like the worst person in the entire world. But she has a lot of stuff that I think she needs to deal with. And this image she has of herself as someone who's really empowered and together and successful just does not reflect the version of her that we have seen. So I hope that if she watched the show back, she realized how deep her intimacy issues go, and she's trying to deal with that, because like there's a lot of stuff going on there, man, and it was not a good look. So I wrote down some takeaways because I wanted this to be at least somewhat educational and not just me ranting about a reality TV show, because I would hope that's not what you guys come to me for, but who knows. The first thing, like, and I have this conversation with clients all the time, is I think we all need to have a better appreciation for the fact that sometimes relationships end just because they end. And it's not an indication of what we did right or wrong or our worth as value as people, but just the fact that this wasn't it for us. And I think that's the reason that a lot of people struggle to let relationships go, is that they feel like they did something wrong or they needed to do something better or different or whatever. And most of the time, I think it's really just that it's not the right people at the right time. And that's okay. Like, you're allowed to have relationships that don't work out. You're going to have some, because every relationship we're in is going to fail until someone dies, basically. Like, that's the only way that you know a relationship is successful, I guess, is that one of you dies before you break up. And so it's kind of hard to gauge those before you get there. And the other thing, so there's like several parts where Damien reminds G not to yell at him. And she says, she's talking about her family, and she's like, we all yell, so it's normal. And I think that's something that we all need to be super mindful of. Our families set the tone for what we think relationships and love and conflict and communication are supposed to look like. And the tone that my family set is not the same tone that my partner's family set. So we're gonna have to spend a lot of time making sure that we actually understand each other the way that we think they do. Because if I think that doing the dishes means I love you, and he thinks that buying me something shiny means I love you, then neither one of us is ever going to feel loved. Like, you have to communicate about the way that you think things are supposed to be. Because if you have differing ideas of what it's supposed to look like, you're gonna have no idea if you're doing it right. And by right, I don't mean like there's a correct way to be in a relationship. I just mean like right so that your partner understands you the way that you want them to. I wish I could remember when she asked the question, but there is a moment, I think either right before or right after Mexico, or maybe it's before the weddings, where Vanessa asks everyone, is love enough? And the answer is no. And this is kind of a bummer, and I know that, but love all by itself is not enough to sustain a relationship forever. Like, I work with a lot of really high conflict couples. Like, my office holds a lot of screaming all the time, luckily for all of my coworkers. And in these high conflict couples where they fight more than they do anything else, I always ask them, What are we trying to save here? What do you like about each other? What is it that we're trying to hold this together for? And if the only answer they can give me is, well, I love him, then I don't work with that couple. Because love isn't enough. You need to have something that you actually like about each other. There needs to be things that you respect. There need to be qualities that you want present in your own life. Because if you don't have those, like, what's the point? Like, it doesn't matter if you love me if you can't treat me like you love me. And you can't treat me like you love me if you don't respect me or if you're not interested in who I am as a person. So no, Vanessa, love is not enough, but thank you for asking so that I got to talk about this, because it doesn't justify a video of its own, but I think it's interesting. The other thing I thought was interesting and something that we should all be aware of is how often I saw, and particularly with Jessica and Carlton, people who say and act like they want one thing, but their behavior suggests something entirely different. So like if I tell you I want to be president of the United States, but I spend like all of my time doing meth in an alley behind a Safeway, like maybe that's not actually what I want. You know what I mean? And I think it's important for us all to occasionally take stock of the choices we're making every day and see if those line up with the things that we're saying we want. Because for a lot of us, they don't, and we just don't notice. And that can be especially true in relationships. Like if you say you want someone to be honest, but when they're honest, you scream at them, maybe honesty is not actually something that you're very comfortable with, and you should think about that and work on it a little bit. The other thing, like Janina kept talking about butterflies, and she didn't have butterflies anymore. And I think it's pretty mainstream at this point, but the whole concept of new relationship energy and how exciting it is when you first meet someone and you're first getting to know them and everything's new and cool. And eventually that goes away because there's like the reality of a human being on the other side of it. Like there's stuff that my partner does that when we first started dating, I thought was so cute. And now I want to strangle him when he does it. And it doesn't mean that I don't love him, because I do, but also he forgets things and it's not adorable, it's super annoying. And that's like a normal process for a relationship to go through. Not being infatuated anymore, which is something Kelly kept talking about, and not having butterflies anymore. That's not an indication that you don't love a person, unless there's nothing on the other side of that. And then, well, I guess that is what's happening then. I think this show is a really, really good example of the fact that we really often take steps to protect ourselves, and that just makes us feel really isolated and alone. Because there's no way to be vulnerable and intimate without also risking something. And lots and lots and lots of people try, and a great deal of my work in therapy is around that very issue. Because there's no way to form a connection if you're not willing to give something. And in order to be willing to give something, you have to be willing to lose something. And that's hard, and it's terrifying, and it feels really bad, but it's also the only way to do it. The only way that we can ever really connect with another person and be intimate on the level that we all think we want to be intimate is to risk everything. And most people on this show just weren't willing to do that, and that's why I think a lot of them wound up not being together. The last thing I'm going to say about Love is Blind is two things that Amber said that made me really, really love and respect her. And I know that like Amber's kind of a mess, but she's also kind of a genius. So the first one she said, you've got to embrace the mess and see if you can manage it together. And that is 100% true. Because we always think that like things should be perfect if we're really in love, and like, no. Being an adult human being is really, really hard, and sometimes it doesn't work out very well. And it's a mess, and that's okay. You just have to accept that that's the way it is and see if you and your partner can figure out a way to make that work anyway. The other thing she said, and I think she was trying to call out Jessica a little bit with this, was I do think some of the couples, they're more in their heads than in their hearts. They're not really embracing what they're feeling because it scares them. And if that's not like a really succinct way of summarizing what's wrong with Jessica, like, I don't know what is. So be aware of what's in your head and what's in your heart and which one you want to be following. Because fear is really a powerful emotion, and that does not mean that it requires all of our attention. All right, guys. So I don't know about you, but I super hope there's a Love is Blind season 2 because that show is really entertaining and also infuriating. Thanks for watching. I hope your quarantine is going well. Even though we're filming this super far in advance, I sincerely doubt that any of us will be back to normal by the time we put it out. If you are bored in quarantine, you should like this video and share it and subscribe to my channel and watch all the other ones. You can also get in touch with me via Gmail, or you can find me on Twitter. You can also follow me on Instagram, which is emma.cott. Thanks for being here, guys. I'll see you next time.